Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us for this panel event. Just to let you know that this session is being recorded and access to the recording will be shared with you afterwards. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate. You can pop them in the chat, or if you'd like to and you're feeling brave, you do unmute and come on and have a chat. It's great to see everyone, and hello. There will be a dedicated session, a time at the end for Q&A. And we've also had a few questions come into us in advance, so we will look to answer those during the panel too. But it is now 4 o'clock, so without any further ado, let's get started and have a look at today's panel. Okay, so curriculum stories, selecting, sequencing and surviving Ofsted. We've had really popular response to this panel event, and it's great to have so many of you here today. The agenda very loosely will follow what will pop up on your screen now, but it is absolutely our intent for this to be a dynamic event, and we do welcome and indeed encourage your participation. We have got a panel of trusted experts, so they can absolutely handle us derailing the agenda, no problem. Our priority here really is to provide an event that supports you and all your much needed work in school and with young people. We absolutely get it. Staff were all so time poor and now more than ever. So we've also got some really great, useful sessions and quality resources to share with you, and indeed some Ofsted prep, some really helpful questions that you can take away. So I'm Tara Jones, and it's great to be here with you. So Deputy Head, and I quite often actually explain my role now as a cog. I introduce myself as a cog between business and schools, or perhaps industry in the classroom. So I work with eduu.school. I work with a company called GLUU, and I give a lot of curriculum support with eduu.school, and that puts me in a trusted and privileged position to walk the walk, but work with a range of schools. So the panel that joins me today, I've got some trusted colleagues and friends here, so I will be introducing them to you as we go. Rather than a round robin, I want to make the most of the time. So as you can see, great experience right from early years through to Key Stage 4. And just to echo that, it's my privilege to be hosting them today. And we are here to talk in the main. We're going to have a really good chat about curriculum and Ofsted. I think we're above 100 sign-ups for today, and that really speaks volumes. Curriculum and Ofsted held the headlines in education, and I'm sure they will continue to, because we see that the school curriculum absolutely at the heart of the inspection framework. With regard to the transition arrangements in place, so we had the new framework brought in 2019, and that was due to be reviewed in March. So this month we were looking to review it, but Ofsted have confirmed in their inspection handbooks in the update that sort of grace period has been extended to September at the earliest. And they've extended this transition period, giving schools opportunity to develop their curriculum at those other 6 months, because we've had this huge and ongoing COVID disruption. And the work we've done with schools throughout the pandemic, and now I suppose we're working towards a post-pandemic landscape, it's remained really clear to us. Curriculum design, it can be overwhelming, especially with increasing workloads, and then with the ever-changing educational landscape. So we're really pleased to see that Ofsted have extended that transition period in recognition of those extraordinary pressures caused by the pandemic. And we recognise with you all, with the schools we work with, there's huge variation. In some schools talking about feeling very ready, they might be thinking we're ready to share our curriculum. But for many, that additional time is hugely beneficial, because perhaps haven't had the time to just ensure that learning is sequential in all subjects and in all areas. I think that's going to be really key to our conversation today. We're talking about that curriculum, early years, all the way through, every subject, really clear sequential order through those subjects, skills and knowledge. But I'm going to hand over to somebody who, due to his recent experience, is perfectly positioned to start today's conversation. So Matt Wynne. Matt has just been through an inspection with his school, Holyhead Primary. And Matt, your school boasts an impressive transformation. And we're really grateful for your time today that you've given to share some of that success story with us.
Thank you, Tara. So yeah, it's there's obviously 10 minutes is a short time to explain 2 days worth of inspection and 5 years worth of academisation, but I will try my very best. And so what I'll try and do today is I'll try and break it up into a few sections, some overarching things that were our strengths that I feel would be helpful for you to hear. Some quirks that maybe caught us off guard a little bit that we were like, okay, that would be quite handy to know. And then a bit of a sort of, now that I've been through it, what did I genuinely believe were the important bits that maybe I did know at the time, or maybe has sort of confirmed that to me afterwards. So I'll sort of go through that. Our deep dives were in reading, maths, history and music. We found the Ofsted inspectors, we had a head HMI as well as the lead inspector, were incredibly fair. And I think as a young head, not that I'd look at anymore now after being through COVID, but you have that fear factor, don't you, that, oh my gosh, it's Ofsted. But really, I can't say that was the case for us. Of course you worry, that's human nature, but as a school, if you love your kids and you do them right every day, really the only pressure you have is trying to showcase that in a short period of time. And when I say showcase, I don't mean put on a show. I mean, if you've only got 20 minutes to explain what you're passionate about in history, have you really got that so clear that for somebody who doesn't live and breathe your school, you can get your message across in that short space of time? And we did a lot of work with our staff previously about, we know what we do at Holyhead because we're passionate about it and we do it every day, but how can we articulate that to someone who doesn't know us? And weirdly, that was to help when people ask questions, but at the same hand, it helped focus our leaders' conversation so they were able to be clear on what their intent was. So within reading, it probably won't shock you, they looked at early reading, particularly the lowest 20% nationally. We're in a deprived area, so there's quite a high proportion of those children, and they really went into analysing and listening to all the children read as we would all expect. So none of that's probably anything that will shock you. But the bit that sort of where all of that came out right, systematic approach. We recently changed our approach to Rocket Phonics, which is obviously a DFE approved one. We were originally letters and sounds, so we had to have a lot of rejigging of reading prior to the inspection. And the only thing that really came out, so a bit of advice I would give to you would be to ensure your home reading books and your phonics books match explicitly, the link is explicit, because we were in the transition from moving from Rocket Phonics to Rocket Phonics, and some of our home reading books were still Oxford Reading Tree. So if I could go back in time, we did order the books frustratingly, but due to delivery issues, they came, you wouldn't believe this, a week and a half after Ofsted came. But yeah, so that was something from a reading point of view. From a maths point of view, we run a model that's half based on mastery and half on a more traditional model. And again, they like that because sometimes there are pros and cons of mastery, where mastery is great because they're all immersive and you don't leave any children behind, but sometimes it can accidentally become very samey, and sometimes there can accidentally be a lack of challenge. So we have a hybrid model that runs of both. That came across very strongly. Music, we do a 3-tiered approach to music, which again is interesting for you all to know. We have what's within our E3L curriculum, which is very similar to what's going to be taught later about the L4L curriculum, where we have our music taught within our themes, but at the same hand, we have breakdown days and focus days where we go into depth in specific areas of music. And then on top of that, we also have a 3rd tier where we have a really intensive music provision in year 5, where we do something called rock band, where children are part of a band all the way through the year and they do an hour a week. I think all of those things, notation, composition, all of those things that we probably, when the framework came out, we were all a bit scared about, because they're quite interesting conversation points for children to get them to understand. They were things that we had to really work on as a school. The probably biggest debates we had, and it didn't help that the HMI inspector came from a history background and her daughter was studying to be history at university, was majority of our conversations were around that. So all the things that you would expect, looking at threads within themes, how that interconnectivity, the web of learning, all of those things that are buzzwords but really are not when they're done properly, were looked into. All of that's thought through, and every child they spoke to was able to articulate why they were learning what they were learning. So it's try and accidentally, as you're moving your curriculum forward, you don't accidentally forget to bring all of your staff with you and all of the children.
Matt, I just think that that's really important to pick up. The history you've mentioned there, the E3L, which is mirrored in eduu.school, which we're all talking about today. But the fact that your children were able to articulate the before and the after, and that sequential learning, is a huge in eduu.school, and I think in any school curriculum. Is that a case that you found the inspectors were asking the children as they were learning, tell me about previous learning and what's currently happening in your lesson?
Yeah, so they didn't do a separate book scrutiny, which is one of the quirks I was going to say.
Oh, how interesting.
That they did their book scrutinies while they did their pupil voices, and they did that in tandem, which actually as a principal I think is a fairer way to have a pupil voice and a book scrutiny. But yeah, you're right, a lot of the questions aimed at the children were all about, what do you know, what impact, what does that link to, where did that come from, what was the bigger picture, where were you aiming to? And this is a phrase I use at Holyhead, next door learning. Our children are very good at next door learning, where they're able to articulate the before, what they're doing, and after. And because of those questions, that sort of line of questioning from inspectors was strong. The next set of questions then was about conceptual understanding across periods of time, and looking at things like hierarchy through the ages, or law, or food, or entertainment. And as a team, that's where our next step is in our journey. And we got a very strong good in curriculum. She sort of hinted on that. And I think if we could have got past that line with children understanding that they understand this period of time to be able to compare, but they were struggling across multiple periods.
And I think, Matt, what perhaps might be important to share with the panelists is a very strong good for where you are and how quickly you've turned that round in academy, perhaps a little bit of the backstory to that, and how the implementation of the curriculum has had such a strong impact in a short space of time.
Massively. So sorry, I got straight into the meat, didn't I? Because I was conscious of the 10 minutes. But yeah, so our school was special measures when we took it on just under 5 years ago. And there was no curriculum here at all. So putting the curriculum in, having that new expectation from the framework weirdly came at a good time for us, because we were having to start again anyway. But yeah, it was... It's knowing where to start first when you know you've got to improve everything is a really tricky thing, because you don't want to do everything poorly. So as a team, we had to put a curriculum in place first and foremost, and then after, what we've done is then we've review each area and subject to make sure there are no gaps within specific subjects. And as a team, our children have gone through understanding people, places, names, dates, all that level of depth of knowledge. We do quizzes, low stake quizzes as the theme goes through. So we're aware children at that point, they can articulate that as the next phase of our journey. Some of that's coming out into written outcomes, but that's a next step for us. So they can talk the talk, but they sometimes don't always write it in a written format. And then the next step for us from an articulation point of view, like Tara said, is moving towards being able to, I suppose, in essence, from a history perspective, talk like an historian. But let's be honest, if I put us all on the spot right now as adults, I think we'd struggle with some of those concepts. And so it's a tricky... You can't get to that point from my perspective if you haven't taught the individual pockets of knowledge and skills. And we're at a point now where we're sort of connecting those buckets together as a team.
Fantastic. Matt, I think that we'll have some more questions coming through and coming to you. I also am very pleased to say, because Matt sent this to me in the week and I thought this is gold dust for anyone coming to the panel, Matt has very kindly put together some of the questions that he and his team were asked, which we can share with you. And I know that everyone will be frantically scribbling on those notes. But what's so clear to me from the time I've spoken with you and talking to you is that that curriculum was so well thought out and so clearly constructed for staff to share that they were able to answer the questions. And that's what it comes down to. I think we hear this word articulate all the time, and you just mentioned staff articulating, but also then children articulating where they've been. It's so key, isn't it, that shared language across the school?
Very much so. I think from a principal's point of view, there's and not just a principal, from in our profession, I think there's many professionals overcomplicate things when they worry. And it's really scary to simplify things. But if you don't simplify your processes or your curriculum with regards to what it is you're trying to do, you then don't have the time to go into the depth of conversations with staff and children, which is really where we want to be. And that's something for me as a school that we've really thought of work-life balance. We've thought about, if this isn't worth putting in our curriculum, why are we doing it? And we have a really good culture here of challenge. And that includes the children too. So we speak to children about, did they get anything out of that lesson? Did they feel it was beneficial? And I know that seems quite high level, but they're the kind of chats we're having our children.
Well, I dare say that was also identified through the personal development area of your report. So I think the conversations and that high level element with the children has clearly been reflected and picked up by Ofsted, because that was an area you did particularly well in.
Yeah, so we're really, really proud. In the whole history of our school, the word outstanding has never been used to describe the school, even back when you look through all the reports. So to have an area that was outstanding, and for a few other areas they said we were close. I've actually written them down because I thought, you know what, rather than be vague, if I was in your position, I'd want to know exactly what questions were asked. So when we got to a point where our PD provision was seen as a strong good, as we all are aware, the line of inquiry changes then to see if we're outstanding. So making sure your enrichment provision is specifically targeted at certain groups. So we have a very strict model of how we approach it to pupil premium children and SEND children, to make sure that background doesn't play a part on what enrichment children get, all the way down to things like Passport to Success, to work with families that have been through tough times during COVID, and looking at supporting wellbeing of families, not just children. So all of those things that probably most schools do at like a general level. But then the questions they came back to me on the start of the second day were these exact questions. So give me examples of where children have excelled following provision at Holyhead. These questions are the questions that Ofsted said that these are the ones that schools tend to fall down on when they're trying to show that they feel their provision is an outstanding provision. Okay. So some examples of that from my perspective, obviously you'll be able to make it personal to your schools, is we work with the Hippodrome. So we'd had 2 children gain scholarships to perform over there in productions. That would never have happened if we hadn't had that provision. We've had 16 children go and represent the Black Country in the gymnastics finals. To put that into context, we're a 1 form-entry primary school, and comparing that to 3 form-entry primary schools, they're only having half the amount of children represent in the Black Country finals. We have 6 children due to the music provision we do with rock band now play at a local studios. So it's kind of things, it's about being brave. It's about having less provision, but the provision you have, does it really have that so what impact? And have you broken that barriers down? Another question I was asked was, can you give me examples of tailored provision where you've specifically picked specific groups and targeted provision? So for argument's sake, we've done creative therapeutic mentoring service, and we use counselling in school for specific children that we feel is an additional provision to what we can provide as a school. I could talk to you for years about that.
I know, and I've just clocked the time as well, yeah. So we'll probably leave it there, Matt, for now, but we'll come back with questions to you. The questions I mentioned that Matt shared earlier in the week, my colleague Andy's just dropped those into the chat. So we've got some subject specific questions that Ofsted asked, but I do think that there are so many people who would probably just like to sit now and pick your brains. I've already gained so much there. I know I'm hearing some of it for the second time and taking on board how quickly you could make changes in your setting following on what you've said. So really grateful, Matt. And I think it might be a sensible move to come to Corinna next, if that's okay, Corinna, because two incredibly different settings. And I think I picked up on something Matt said there about the children being really articulate and talking the talk, and then the impact in their writing. And we've had conversations, I've worked with Corinna and in her lovely school before about giving over lots of information and children writing at length and having lots of information, but then perhaps not being able to articulate and have the higher order questioning and the conversations. And so you've been on a huge journey with your curriculum to make some of those changes. So we'd love to hear what you've been up to.
Hi, thanks, Charlotte. Yes, we have been on a rather big journey, and I know it was lovely to see you actually. You've popped in and seen us recently, haven't you? We'd been on quite an adventure with the English and maths, as I think often schools can sometimes start to question where they're at with that, and we brought a lot of things forward, and we've got to the point where we felt like we'd embedded a really rich maths and English curriculum, and that of course made us start to look at all the other subjects in our curriculum. And speaking to a lot of the staff team, we were finding that the foundation subjects, we felt like we were almost bombarding our children with information, but that sometimes they remembered it, sometimes they didn't, and our curriculum was increasingly feeling quite fraught for the teachers as well as the pupils. I know I stood in front of a class and felt like I was just pushing information down the throats all day. So I began to work with the team and look at different ways of doing things. So we started with research, which is often the best way to start, isn't it? And looked at curriculum experts, different areas of research, Mary Myatt, Jonathan Lear, to name a couple. And, you know, their ideas really resonated with not where we were, but where we wanted to get to. And you know, we really wanted a curriculum where children had the opportunity to explore, to deepen their learning and to breathe. And I didn't feel at that point in time our curriculum gave them any chance to breathe. So having chatted with colleagues, myself and my fantastic year 6 teacher decided that we wanted to change things and that we'd be the guinea pigs and we'd try out some different things and take things forward on a thematic journey. So we began with staff meetings where we considered the journey that we wanted our children to go on from reception right through to year 6. How were they starting with us? Where were they at? And where did we want them to go? And how did we want them to leave us? And at the same time, myself and Laura really got stuck into the curriculum and having a really good look at the national curriculum. What knowledge did they really need? What were we filling them with, and what did they really need? And what skills do they need for this ever-changing world that we're living in at the minute? And we wanted to put that in a package for the children that was cohesive, that was engaging, and where pupils could become deeper, more confident, independent learners. Because we were very much feeling we were developing learners that were increasingly becoming passive. You know, we were trying to fill them so much with curriculum content that they didn't have time to own the learning themselves. So we decided, because we'd had success with the English curriculum, as you know, Tara, we decided that we would take our writing text as kind of the core and build our curriculum from that. And we wanted to include all the curriculum subjects within that, excluding the maths, obviously, which is slightly different. But we brought in our PSHE, you know, we really wanted to engage them in a really thematic approach, so they're just immersed in the theme. So previously, when we'd looked at the curriculum, we very much had our allocated time slots, as I know lots of schools do. So science gets an hour and a half and your history's got an hour. And we felt at that stage that that was one of the reasons we were feeling so under pressure.
I think that's it's a barrier people forget, isn't it? You start with the timetable. Can you fit all of your curriculum into a timetable? It's almost impossible. In senior leadership, you sit down at the start of the year and you bring in the PPL allocations and you think, how can you make this work? So when we talk about organising the curriculum, some of the conversations that we've had is, how do we make this work for the staff and the students? And the students always as a priority, but what was happening sometimes in a way to organise the staff were students missing out because they didn't have that opportunity for depth of subject within the curriculum.
Yeah. And I think the staff were feeling they had this pressure to fit it into that neat time slot. And, you know, what did you do when you came to the end and they hadn't finished that task, or you wanted to go into the afternoon on it? And suddenly, well, we can't because we've got to change our curriculum. So we had a really good look at that. And I think taking that pressure away to a curriculum that flows, because it's so immersive, has helped the teachers breathe. You know, a lot of them are saying to me, oh, it's lovely, because they were so into that task, and, you know, their research was going so in depth that we spent longer on that. And, you know, the conversations between teachers and pupils are so wonderful now. They're so much richer. And they're getting so much more from the curriculum. So having changed things, we were finding that the teachers were more enthused, and so were our pupils. They really were, you know, they were actually coming in saying, oh, we call it project. So the pupils' words to us are, oh, we're doing project today. Are you coming in to do some project with us, or are we having a project with someone else? And that was just so lovely, because whereas previously, although they were doing science and history and geography through the day, they're desperate now to come in and have project time. So they're invested in a way that previously they weren't invested in the curriculum, and they're really able to get stuck into their learning now. So we tested things, as I say, with year 5 and 6. And I think myself and Laura, the year 6 teacher, felt so much better. So as we were talking to the staff about we could go on this journey, they were listening. Our issue being, Tara, that going on this journey meant that all my holidays and all my weekends were gone on planning thematically, and so were Laura's. So we were often on the phone, and whilst we were loving doing it, it wasn't sustainable, and it wasn't something I felt I could take forward and say, right, project's brilliant, we want you to all take on this thematic approach. Here you go.
And I think that echoes some of what Matt said to begin with that. You know, if you start without your curriculum, you can't just suddenly sit down. You've got to have the structures, the sequencing. You had within the trust, the Explore Excel, which is mirrored in eduu.school, and you recognise with your staff a thematic curriculum straight off. Sounds great, but how are we going to invest the time? And it was great to come in and see that you've been able to use eduu.school and implement that into your curriculum journey.
Yeah, well, I have to say, I have said this to you, it was like the answer to our prayers, because suddenly I had something that I could take to staff that was concrete, and that's given them so much confidence. So although we adapt things to our children, as every school needs to, you know, and we're all at different places with our children in our schools, but everyone's embraced it. Everyone was then going, I'll do it, Corinna, I'll do it. And suddenly, having thought we'd trial it in a couple more classes, the whole school wanted to do it. So it has gone whole school now, and very successfully. I mean, you've been in and seen the impact already. We're still fairly early in our journey with it. But our curriculum's more fluid. We move very naturally between subjects. our assessment is developing, and I'm feeling much more confident from an SLT perspective that I can talk about progress throughout the school. And it's just wonderful to teach. What I love is that we've had things like, for example, as you can see from some of the examples of the work, we're currently looking at Galaxy Quest, and that's some work I'm doing with Year 5 children. We've spent time really researching the solar system and finding out more about planets and producing information packs for each other and having wonderful conversations and modelling the solar system. And we're now moving forward to next week, we're going to have a look at an art session on pointillism, and it all just flows. And I love the fact.
Oh, is that just me, or has Corinna's microphone just gone into outer space? Your microphone's gone on a Galaxy Quest there, Corinna. So that's how embedded you are in the thematic learning. So I do think we just lost you on audio there for a moment. So we may well come back to you, but just to say, it was, I mean, you can pop her back on the screen maybe, Andy, because I know she'll be there smiling through it all. It was a joy to come into school and to hear the children talking so articulating about their theme, about the thematic learning, what they've been doing, what they were going to be doing. It's exactly what you would want to see when you're coming into a curriculum deep dive. But there's this theme of time again there, Cahir, and I think I'm just going to jump into Key Stage 3 and 4 now. We've got Cahir from the Shine and Trust, and he works in secondary. You do something really special with time in the trust, don't you, with regard to how you can, rather than standing up, as Corinna said there, and just giving out information, you spend a lot of time with your students, nurturing them through a theme. So we could pick up on that point that Corinna, really great point, and raised. She's back. Good to have you back. And let's see how that's mirrored and carries on through to Key Stage 3, if that's okay, Cahir.
Yeah, thanks, Tara. So I think one thing that's really important to begin with is the structure that we have in Key Stage 3. So when the students come to us in Year 7, they'll be with their one class teacher for 14 hours a week doing the thematic curriculum. And what that really benefits us as staff and students is the fact that we get to know that group of students really quite well. And therefore, when we do come to personalising some of these resources, it's actually really measured and really focused on what's best for their development. And I know that Matt said about this earlier in the session about getting to know those kids and what's going to work for them, and knowing each other. And I think that's quite a powerful tool because, you know, being in again, quite a deprived area, we really try and focus on family support, family opportunities, connecting everybody and everything in that one direction. And I think that's really important. If our students in Key Stage 3 quite early on can connect curriculum subject areas, but also wellbeing as key fundamental part of that curriculum, then it really supports them moving through into Key Stage 4 and beyond. And we have a real big focus on trying to create a culture of lifelong learning with our students. So we're not just seeing them as students that will go from Key Stage 3 to Key Stage 4, GCSEs, thank you very much. It's more about how we can build that holistic picture of a student and help them to progress moving forward. And I think that's what the thematic curriculum does really, really well. And I think, you know, in terms of from a delivery point of view as a member of staff, it's quite exciting when you can explore some of these features together. I'm a specialist history teacher, but I love teaching some of the other disciplines when I'm teaching a theme such as India, and we explore the RE that's in India. We explore some of the Bollywood and the film and the music and the art. And actually, when you can share that passion and fun and joy in learning with the students, it really helps them to engage in that context. So yeah, as an approach at Key Stage 3, it really does help the transition of those young individuals, because moving to secondary school is quite a big move for young people. And I think that having that support network, having somebody that knows you incredibly well as you start your secondary school journey is really important. And obviously, as part of our curriculum, we use CUTH and their mental health and wellbeing resources. I know that recently, you know, we reshared an article about things to help when the world feels a little unsafe. that was put into eduu.school as part of a previous theme. We've reshared that with students to support them with what's going on in the world at the minute and some of the things that they're seeing. And the fact that the students feel comfortable and confident and safe discussing some of these, you know, key worldly matters is really, really important for their well-being, but also for them to connect to the wider learning that's happening. So yeah, I think, conscious of time again, but I just really want to.
It's a really key point here, because again, back to Ofsted updates that went out this week in a regional update, they talked about the issues we're still seeing with that lack of transition, and how, you know, year 7 and 8, they're proving to be really difficult years for our students. And I think certainly outside of the trust, if we're looking elsewhere where we do have children that perhaps aren't having that same amount of time with one teacher, you still need to look at how you're building the curriculum to support them for life, not for the classroom. It's not about what's happening in the hour that you have them in front of you in your history lesson. It's a much bigger picture than that. And I think the pandemic highlighted that for everyone.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, a lot of these skills across subjects are transferable. And if students realise that and notice that actually this skill that I'm using in history, I can also use in English and science, and then, you know, they can connect that together, all of a sudden they're not doing history, they're doing a skill that's going to support them everywhere else. And I think that's quite powerful. When you see that realization in the students, it is really nice as a teacher to see that actually they've connected those 3-4 different subject disciplines together, and they now understand how that works. And I think that is really powerful. Whereas, you know, when I teach history, I don't necessarily see how they made that connection when they were in their geography lesson. So thematically, I think it supports us. We get to know the students incredibly well. And I think knowing their families incredibly well is also important when you think about transition through to Key Stage 3. And it's something that primary schools do incredibly well, but sometimes does get lost in that transition to secondary. So I think it's quite a powerful tool to support our students.
Thank you so much. I could listen to you all day. It's such important messages, and I think if we can see and learn, I always say this, if we look down quite often, let's look down at early years and what happens well, and bring that up through into Key Stage 1 and through the school. And similarly, what's working well in Key Stage 2 and how can that aid and support the transition? And that shared collaborative approach across key stages just strengthens any curriculum in a school. I know, Matt, you had really deep Ofsted questions with your early years team, very specific, and they really, you know, nailed and looked down at what's happening on early years and how does this lead into the future child and the child where they will be in year 6. Andy Pritchard, my colleague, has been dropping into the chat some examples of eduu.school. I think we've had a look there at some year 7 and some year 4, so that's available to everyone that's here. Corinna, when we lost you there to outer space with your microphone, we were just going to share some year 5, actually a few of the lessons that you're teaching in Galaxy Quest. So they are available too. You can click and download and have a look at the type of resources we have in eduu.school, this thematic approach that we are talking about. We're a little over, but it's been great conversation. So I'm desperate to get to Lorraine next. Now, Lorraine is head of school at Eton Primary School, happens to be quite local to where I am in Chester. Eton's another school that's been on a big journey, I think is fair to say, Lorraine. We've talked a lot about our staff, our students and our curriculum, but our staff lead it all. And I think we can't really get ready for Ofsted or curriculum unless we've got all our staff on board and we're supporting our staff and supporting staff wellbeing. I think that's what you were going to share with us today, Lorraine. If you're happy for me to hand over with that introduction, I'll pop in this caveat. I've been to Lorraine's school and it's a really calm place to come into and to be in and work in. So how have you done it? How do we capture that calm?
Thanks, Tara. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It has been a big journey. The school was put into special measures just before I and the executive head joined here. And as part of our turning the school around, we had quite a big staff turnover as well. So we've been quite a new team coming into a new environment with, you know, a big mission to turn the school around for the children. And it's lovely, Tara, that you've said that when you've come into school, there is that calmness here, because that's something we've strived really hard to achieve. And it's something that people do notice when they come in. I mean, even from the when you set foot through the door, you'll get a warm welcome. We've got happy staff and happy children, and I think that's really evident when you do come here. But it's not easy, and it's something, like I say, that we've worked really hard to try and achieve. But I think because of when we came into the school, it coincided with the pandemic, and so I think wellbeing has it's been such an important part of our journey because of what we've all been through, nationally, but also as that team trying to turn the school around and deal with the pandemic at the same time. So it's something that I'm very passionate about, wellbeing and looking after the staff, because like you say, Tara, if your staff aren't well and in a good place, then the children aren't going to get the best deal that they could get and that they should get. And so, really, really keen to make sure that we do what we can to safeguard staff wellbeing. And it's nothing groundbreaking, it's not nothing that other schools couldn't do or probably aren't already doing. But just to share some of the things that we have put into place in different areas, I just thought might be useful. One of the things is being mindful of those aspects of school that can impact negatively on staff wellbeing is something that we've really, really thought in mind, and we've been quite proactive in trying to make sure we've counted those. And one of the big things is organisation. Making sure that school's organised. And if you think about a classroom, a well-organised classroom really benefits the children, and even your children with the biggest needs and the biggest challenges, if they're in a well-managed, organised classroom, they can thrive. And it's the same for staff in an organised school. So we've tried to be, and do try to be, really organised. And even something like the fact we've moved to an online calendar, that's made a massive difference, because everyone's got visibility of what's happening all across school. Everyone has access to it. Everyone puts things in there as well as sees what's on there. So it means that we can plan ahead. Staff can plan ahead. Staff work differently. Some staff need to know well in advance things that are coming up, or the staff need a tight deadline. So if we've got things in the calendar, then it means that, however they need to be prepared, they can be, they can start things well in advance if they need to, if that's what helps them to feel calm and organised and in control. It means that we haven't got potential clashes in the timetables or in the calendars that can cause people stress as well, because everyone can see what's happening. So if they want to put something in the diary, they know they just need to check if there's anything else going on there. So we don't have those clashes either. Things like cover for things, we can be well organised with things like that, so staff know who's covering the class, and resources can be shared and prepared. So I think that's had a big impact on us being organised as a workplace. The next thing is, teaching and school, it's a massive role, and schools are busy places, there's no getting away from that, and there's certain aspects of the role that we can't do anything about. You have to do that bread and butter for the children. But we always think, if we're asking staff to do above and beyond the classroom, we ask ourselves why, and does that benefit the children? And sometimes it won't benefit the children. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we won't ask staff to do it, but at least we're asking that question, and we're making sure that we're justifying why we're asking staff to do what we're asking them to do. And if there's no benefit to anything, then we don't ask them to do it. But sometimes there will be, and obviously, there are things that we do above and beyond what we do in the classroom. And then if we are asking staff to do things, we try and give them time to do that wherever possible. And that might be time out of class, which we obviously have to balance with impact on their class. But it might be staff meeting time, it might be inset time, but giving staff that time to do that work benefits them, but also the children, because if you think about their roles as subject leaders, for example, it's such a massive role, especially at the moment. Those subject leader roles, those middle leader roles are really key in terms of making sure provision is as high a quality as possible, but ultimately that the children get the very best quality of provision. And so we want staff to do a really good job in that role. And if they're trying to squeeze it around their class teaching responsibility, then they're not going to have the time and the focus to be able to do it really well. So by giving them time, it means they do a better job. It means that provision across school is better. And ultimately, like I say, the children are getting the best deal that they possibly can. And staff do value the fact that we give them that time where we can. And they really, appreciate that and see that, we value what they're doing, and it gives it that importance back as well, because they're getting that time to do it. policies and procedures are something else that we try and think about and think, are our policies and procedures promoting a work-life balance? And are we asking staff to do things in an efficient way? And one of the things that we looked at was feedback. We call it feedback rather than marking, because we know that feedback is so important to children in terms of moving their learning forward. But feedback doesn't always have to be written, and it's often not the best use of staff's time to be writing the same comment in 30 different books if they've all got similar next steps. It's also not the best use of staff's time to be marking 30 sets of calculations, at the end of the day. So feedback was something that we really looked at, and how we could do that in a way that really benefited the children, but also meant that we weren't asking staff to do things that were unnecessary and added to their workload. So one of the things that we do in maths lessons, for example, the children will be given their work, and they'll be asked to do a certain amount of work themselves, and then actually they'll be asked to mark it themselves. So during this time, the staff are floor walking, they're working with groups, they're intervening to address misconceptions. They might be doing bits of marking themselves to see how the children are getting on, but ultimately those children are responsible for checking how they're getting on during that lesson. So we give them that responsibility. They might have a marking station, they might have their answers on their tables, but they'll mark their own work. If they get them right, then they move on to that next set of questions, or that next step in learning. So we've got that acceleration of progress during lessons. If they get things wrong, then they know they need to go back and find out where they've gone wrong. So they're learning from that as well. But what it means is that at the end of the lesson, all the work should be marked by the children. They've marked where they're up to. And then staff have intervened lots during the lesson because they've been busy, in the classroom. But then what they do at the end of the lesson is they look at the children's books and they group them. So, right, this 10 children, their next step is this, and they've got a similar next step. These children have got this next step. And then what happens the following lesson is the staff will get those children together, verbally feedback and do some input. And then those 15 children will write their own next step in their book. And the member staff writes it once on the board. So they're writing it once, they're giving that verbal feedback, the children are writing it in their books. So it just, again, prevents the staff from having to write unnecessary feedback. We know the feedback's happened because we can see it in the children's books, but it's the children that are writing.
So opposed to a teacher's next step marking, it's on the board and the children are all identifying and valuing their next step. Yeah, it's really interesting. And I'm not just saying this to move on with time, but time has been absolutely the theme in everyone's little 10-15 minutes. Matt was talking about that very short turnaround of time, being part of the trust and implementing the structure of the curriculum. You simply didn't have the capacity or the capability to start a curriculum from scratch, but you needed to invest your time in implementing a well-structured curriculum. Corinna, you looked at the time that staff were spending, subjects, information overload, depth of learning. You wanted to readdress the structure of the time. Kahir, you've then gone on to talk about the importance of time with students and extending that thematic time. And Lorraine, absolutely, you've then said, well, actually, this is what we're seeing for the staff as well. The effective use of the staff time will impact and change wellbeing. And I'd imagine, though, Lorraine, that's only happening effectively at your school because you've got a really robust curriculum in place. So you've put those things in place. You've got organized classrooms, you've got great structures. And I do think, I've just picked up on that hearing each and every one of you talk about different elements or even disciplines within school. Time will always be an issue and a driver for teachers or for anyone in the profession. And it does bring us to, it's 10 to 5, but actually, all our attendees who have been here have stuck with us, so thank you so much. You've been here and listened to everyone talking. It is your opportunity for any Q&A. And Andy, I think I'm just going to also offer the opportunity, if anyone wants to carry on this conversation or they would like to have some time looking at curriculum mapping, perhaps with myself. That's part of my role in the team as curriculum expert. If you might be interested in looking at your school curriculum and seeing how eduu.school could support, you could just drop even the word curriculum into the chat, and I'd happily pick that up with you and offer that to you. Lots of you have already signed up for eduu.school trials, which is fantastic. We do have, the panel here today have used, and some schools are now over to using eduu.school in their curriculum. So there's a few options how we can help you. I'd gladly offer my time to help with some curriculum mapping. You can sign up for a free trial, or also I think my colleague Andy can show you a demo of the site, because we've not actually really shown you eduu.school. We felt it was much more productive and helpful to have a chat about curriculum and to think about where your school's at and your school needs. But now if you want to take the conversation further, we'd love to do that with you. But Matt, Kahir, Corinna, Lorraine, thank you so much, because time is precious and you gave it up for us this afternoon to be here. We have had just a few questions come through. I've got them, Andy. I know that you sent them to me. So, I'll let you see who jumps in first. A great question here about early career teachers, and any advice you might give to an early career teacher in a school that's about to go through Ofsted. Because you can imagine our NQT's early career teachers feeling quite nervous. Perhaps, Matt, did you have anyone in the school that was new to the profession?
Not currently, but I have. I would say when you train to be a teacher, you get a lot of curriculum knowledge. And my advice to always ECTs from my perspective is it takes time to understand the logistics of how a classroom operates. And sometimes you have to live and breathe that for a few months before you can run with other things. So don't beat yourself up too much if it's taken a bit of time to get your head around the logistics. And like we said earlier from Lorraine about timetabling and those things that you can take for granted when you've been a teacher for a few years, which I know we're talking about curriculum, and just really reading up. I always advise my teachers from a theme perspective from eduu.school to, if you think about teaching as a narrow road or a wide road, to teach well, you need to know the wide road, but you need to start with the narrow road. And the beauty with the themes in the curriculum we use, you need to know that much. But as you get more confident and more time, if you read around the Romans, maybe you might not be teaching the Romans that bit. But if a child asks a question, you're more confident to take the learning off in tangible spaces, which that's where the beautiful parts of lessons happen, when children catch you off guard and ask you a question you never thought.
Oh, do you know, Mrs. Travis, share your fact from Galaxy Quest. She's nodding, because Matt, I love that you said that, the beautiful moments. I witnessed the beautiful moments about, well, you tell us, Corinna, about Goldilocks.
So, yes, within our lesson, the children have absolutely, haven't they, gone on this, that we live in the Goldilocks zone. So as Mrs. Jones came in and saw everybody, they were all desperate to share with her that we were in the Goldilocks zone, and she looked at me like, the what? To which they happily told her that it's not too hot and it's not too cold on Earth, it's just right. Which was a lovely moment, wasn't it, Mrs. Jones? And the conversations that went off from that were brilliant.
Well, I've taught space before, and I'd never come across that as a phrase of the Goldilocks zone. So there we go. It was one of those beautiful moments that you mentioned there, Matt, knowing your curriculum. So that was one of the questions. We've also been asked, thank you, what would you suggest a primary school looking to use a thematic approach? Kind of, I suppose, a starting point. So if you're looking to go down that route, or to think about a thematic approach to the curriculum.
Should I jump in? Oh, Matt's going to jump in as well.
No, it's okay. I was politely waiting, but yeah, go on.
I think that's what we've just done. I think if you're at the point where you're feeling that there might be another way and that you can do it better, I'm seeing huge impact and results by moving to a thematic approach for the teachers and for the pupils. And it's all about the pupils, but it does help when, you know, your staff are going, this is working and it's worth investing in. So I think the first thing is to kind of look at where you're at and work out what it is that isn't quite right and isn't feeling quite right. And that for us, that we were frantic, we were bombarded. But I think kind of pinpointing what you're not happy with, and then looking at maybe how you can move your curriculum. I mean, the thematic approach moves everything. So it's kind of having the confidence as well.
Yeah, it's it's a brave decision, isn't it, Corinne? And Lorraine, you're working with Eton and Tarvin, the two primary schools together. You've done quite a brave structure to how you approach the thematic curriculum on a Friday. I don't know if you want to just share how your schools approach that, because it's a really interesting.
Yeah, when we found, like a few of you said already this afternoon, that we just didn't have the time within an afternoon or whatever's timetable for that lesson to really delve deeply into some of those topics that really deserve it, and for the children to really understand it and immerse themselves in it. They just needed more time. So on a Friday, it's sort of our topic day, if you like, and on a Friday, staff can take the time that they need to spend the time on whatever topic subject they need to. So it might be that history, for example, is what they're going to cover all Friday morning, and they've got that time to really get underneath, that superficial learning and dive deep and really immerse the children in that. Or even things like design technology. Try and do that in an afternoon. By the time you've got everything out, it's time to put everything away again. So Friday, they might take the whole day to do their design technology project. So staff have got the freedom on a Friday to really give some of those subjects the time and the depth that they need. And the staff love the freedom of it, and the children just, love that immersive nature of our Fridays. Yeah,
fab. And I think Matt's got something to add to that. Hands up, Matt.
Yeah, it's all funny, the etiquette of online, isn't it? For me, I've taught both discrete and thematic, and I think the big bit is just make sure you're clear of what your driver is and what your passenger is. So when you teach thematically, you will naturally link into other subjects because that's the nature of the beast. But just be careful that it doesn't get muddied, that the children's objective of what you're driving towards gets lost. But the beauty of doing it is, and just being clear about what the disciplines and subjects, because when we've done pupil voices with our children, they've said, what are you learning about? Galaxy Quest. And then when you say, yeah, but what subject are you doing? Galaxy Quest.
Yeah.
And bless the kids, it's because they're so loving the theme. So it's just making sure at the start of each lesson under our waltz, we just have an explicit line underneath just saying what subject discipline it's from.
I went into school and did a deep dive, and I had exactly that. And we thought, what's a really practical, quick win for the school? And we'd start the lesson. What subject's driving this? History, but yes, geography, we're going to look at the Romans in Chester because that's map work, we're in Chester, but ultimately this is a historical theme and we're looking at ancient Rome. So really important to have pointed that out. Thank you. And finally, and then we will wrap up and let everyone go, but like I say, everyone's stuck with us because we're having such interesting conversations. So Kahir, you've kept quiet for the Q&A. I'll come to you. What do you think might be some really quick wins a school could do to support staff when they know Ofsted is imminent? So there must be a feeling amongst the group or out there generally about this sort of Ofsted fear or the prepping for Ofsted. How best to help support staff?
I think it's having some practical like overview sheets that staff can quickly look at to see where subjects are being covered across their curriculum area. And I know that's something that we've really pushed, and having this subject mapping document that people can find quite easily and look at. And it's not 20 pages long, it's one page, nice and easy for each subject, just shows that progression and that curriculum spread. And I think that's really important. Having that concise, clear curriculum subject mapping is really important.
A bit like a how-to on a crib sheet.
Yeah,
curriculum
absolutely.
To glance at. Yeah. Okay, well, I think we'll leave it there for a moment. I know that somebody asked in the chat, they couldn't quite see the questions you put in, Matt, and I know that everyone will want to get their hands on that. So if you weren't able to access any of the documents that we've dropped into the chat, if you let Andy know, because we absolutely wanted to give you those practical solutions and make sure that you were leaving today with, I'm going to take this back into school, this will help me, staff meeting, or I'll have a go. You can try one of the thematic lessons, take one of Corinna's Galaxy Quest lessons from eduu.school. Yeah, so we've got a few people unable to access them. So if you do make a comment, we'll make sure that we do get those to you. Really sorry. I mean, it's never a live Zoom without some sort of technical issue. So there we go. Thank you very much for joining us. I do. Oh, there we go. Someone else said they haven't had any of the resources, so I'm not sure what's happened there. Perhaps just keep that chat going and say, make sure you send them to me. Make sure that you can get them. And I think someone who's in charge around here, certainly not me, will pop a poll up just with a little bit of feedback. And again, in that poll, if you would like to get logged on to eduu.school or to have a look at the resources that we've got, you can access them there. So thank you so much for joining us. And I do think that there it is. There we go. So the poll's popped up, and thank you so much. Very grateful if you're able to answer that before you disappear. And apart from that, go and have a lovely Wednesday evening, and we shall, yeah, so someone's popped in the chat, send me the resources. If you do that, we'll absolutely get those useful resources straight over to you.